Looking back over the years, the WNBA has been in a long-standing journey. And the journey since its inception has continued and went over for many years. The WNBA has battled against the NBA to get its point across that we have equality, and equality is what we're built on. And as the Northwestern Journal of Law and Social Policy, dating all the way back to winter 2008, analyzing the WNBA mandatory age education policy from a legal, cultural, and ethical perspective, women, men, and the professional sports landscape. The study from Mark Edelman and from Keith Harrison is understanding the journey of the over 29 years the WNBA has had an existence in analyzing and understanding the mandatory age educational policy. Again, from a legal, cultural, and ethical perspective, women, men, and the professional sports landscape. And the study has went on as the WNBA had a desire to have a women's league, and the NBA really understood and was willing to make an effort of establishing the women's league. And the establishment for the sociological landscape of women's basketball in America, the limited opportunity for women to perform as professional athletes in a male dominated culture was well documented in terms of resources devoted to the popularity and the historical discrimination against women athletics. Until recently, professionally, athletics were primary for men. With the late integration of women into the professional sports, the role of the female athlete has developed differently. Organizations such as the NCAA have played a major role in the ideology and promotion of women's sports. The ideology seriously contrasts somewhat with the notion of ruggedly individualistic male athletes. The relationship between men in sports and their impact on young girls indicates image is everything. Since the emergence of women's collegiate and professional sports, young girls have begun to participate in athletics at an all time high rate. While Title IX has been a major factor in cultivating women's athletics over the last 30 years, the age and educational policy of the WNBA may contribute to a whole new culture of scholarly women that happen to play basketball. For instance, female student athletes graduate from college with a higher rate than any other student in American education. Indeed, in the journey, women in sports have often been the best examples of synergy between academic and athletic excellence. Specifically with women's basketball, Candace Parker of the Tennessee Volunteers, presently one of the high profile superstars in the women's professional sports, was a scholar athlete as well. Candace Parker was recognized as Bowl Scholar, which is University of Tennessee's adapted version of the National Program Scholar Baller. The fact that Parker is a woman of color, African American, also exemplifies the growth of opportunities that African American women enjoy in college sports as scholars and athletes. These opportunities have come with struggles, especially for African American women that experience challenges of both gender and racial discrimination. Nevertheless, there is no other side to the synergy between academics and athletics. The WNBA rule inequitably requires prospective women of professional basketball players to first offer their services for 4 years to NCAA college basketball program, even while their male counterparts are allowed to earn money and play. And as the journey has been long in the professional women's sports, moreover, one notion of the policy that is talented female athletes must delay their personal gratification and first achieve academic pursuits prescribed to them by society and the corporate sport culture. This reinforces old and dangerous stereotype of women being necessarily philanthropic creatures, caring, passive, and non-aggressive. Conversely, men are allowed to be individualistic. The clash between the educational ideals of female student athletes and the merits of personal autonomy complicate evaluating the ethics underlying the WNBA and its age education policy. We must first look at the history of women of professional basketball. Founded in 1996, the WNBA consists of 14 teams. It is more mature in terms of age than the NBA. It has been an ethnic makeup of approximately 60% American, African American players, 40%. Now that number was in 2008. It has risen much higher today. Based on WNBA statistics, over 90% of the players who have earned bachelor's degrees from four-year institutions and 20% have earned graduate degrees. The culture of education, which in essence requires WNBA players to earn college degrees, is in stark contrast to WNBA players' peers in the NBA, the National Football League, Major League Baseball, National Hockey League, and many other women's sports as well. The early struggles of women professional basketball in America. In its early years, American women professional basketball was filled with various short lived ventures. After generations of men professional basketball leagues without a female counterpart, two women professional basketball leagues burst into the scene in 1970s. The ladies of the Professional Basketball Association, the LPBA, and the Women's Basketball League, the WBL, both leagues were defunct by 1981. But the LPBA and the WBL struggled from the beginning because their high salaries, low sponsorship revenues, and team owners without significant investment income. Unlike the NBA, neither female professional basketball league had the benefit of a television contract. Without regular television revenues, neither league was able to turn a profit. As you move forward to by 1981, the LPBA and the WBL had folded, leaving the United States without professional women's basketball. In fact, the women did not return to America for 9 years. On March 15, 1990, the Women's Sports Association Professional Basketball League presented itself as the first of several small regional women's basketball leagues to emerge in America. The Women's Sports Association Professional Basketball League attempted to control expenses by limiting its host cities to the greater California area. After some initial success, other regional women's leagues followed, such as the Women's World Basketball Association in the Midwest, Liberty Basketball Association on the East Coast. Like many small startup and professional sports leagues, the new Regional Women's League attempted to draw fan interest by tinkering with the game's traditional rules. For example, the LBA lowered the basket by 1 foot so women could eat more easily slam dunk. Despite such ingenuity, the LBA disbanded within one season due to recession. The other regional women's basketball leagues also ceased to exist soon thereafter. With the failure of regional women's basketball leagues, sports entrepreneurs in the 1990s decided to relaunch a national women's professional basketball league as early as the summer of 1992. with the Summer Olympics. NBA Commissioner David Stern began to consider the possibility of the NBA funding a national upstart women's basketball league. Even before Stern could propose a business plan, however, California entrepreneur Steve Hams and 11 other investors announced the formation of their own women's basketball league, the American Basketball League. Initially an 8-team league, the ABL business plan included teams playing a 40-game season between the months of October and February, overlapping with the first half of the NBA season. The original host cities included Atlanta, Columbus, Denver, Hartford, Springfield, Portland, Richmond, Seattle, and San Jose. Where the WNBA, the Women's Basketball League headquarters, was located. According to the business plan, all ABA teams, at least initially, would be owned and operated by the ABL as a single entity. And the league would only draft players that had graduated from college. In 1995, Hams announced that the ABL had signed 9 of the 11 players on the women's United States Olympic team, each to a 2-year professional contract with non compete clauses, a move intended to fortify the league's position as the premier home of women's professional basketball. According to Hams, the league planned to pay each of the U.S. Olympic team members $125,000, maintain a league average salary of $70,000 a year, and institute a league minimum salary of $40,000 a year. All decisions intended to thwart the emergence of a competitor league. Additionally, ABL secured sponsorship agreements with 4 major companies: Reebok, First USA Bank, Lady Foot Locker, and the basketball manufacturer Baden. Yet, despite Ham's best efforts to make the ABL the exclusive women's basketball league, on April 24th, 1996, almost 7 months before the first ABL game, the NBA announced that it too was launching a league, a women's professional basketball, and the name would be called the WNBA, which would begin play in the summer of 1997. Unlike the ABL, the WNBA planned to compete during a 10-week season in the summer, which did not overlap with the NBA season. Also, the WNBA model enjoyed an immediate advantage of being backed by the NBA, a well fortified American business with powerful management. On June 28th, 1996, a full year before the first WNBA season was to begin, the WNBA entered into a 5-year prime television contract with the National Broadcasting Company, NBC. In addition, before playing a single game, the WNBA entered into a substantial television pacts with ESPN and Lifetime Network. Meanwhile, ABL television coverage was limited to just 12 Sunday nights games on Sports Channel. The ABA was the first league to begin play, and as early results were positive in opening league game, 5,513 fans witnessed Colorado Explosion defeat the Seattle Rain. The same night, fans packed the Hartford Civic Center to see the New York, England Blizzard defeat the Richmond Rage. Throughout the inaugural season of one of the brightest ABL stars was Jackie Joyner Kersee, the beloved American 1988 Olympic champion in the horizontal jump. Even though the 1996 Olympic basketball standout of Cheryl Swoops and Rebecca Lobo ultimately rejected the ABL. The ABL still hosted most of the 1996 Women's Basketball Olympians. In the inaugural ABL championships, Valley Still, a 35-year-old who just 4 years earlier had been teaching high school, finished with 14 points, 13 rebounds to lead Columbus Quest to a 77-64 victory over the Virginia Rage before a sellout crowd of 6,313 fans. The WNBA, meanwhile, opened its inaugural season June 21st, 1997, with the fanfare of an NBA marketing blitz. The league placed teams in New York, Charlotte, Cleveland, Houston, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Sacramento, and Salt Lake City. Former NBA Vice President Val Ackerman was promoted to the position of the league's first commissioner. Nike, Coca-Cola, and American Express all signed on as premier league sponsors. In the WNBA model, players' salaries were kept low, below the average of the ABL salary rate. And the WNBA initially implemented a league wide salary cap on all players of $50,000. With the fanfare heavy, 14,284 spectators turned out to the Los Angeles Forum to watch the first WNBA game between the Los Angeles Sparks and the New York Liberty. The WNBA also enjoyed opening crowds of 11,455 in Cleveland, 8,915 in Salt Lake City. By season's end, the wildly televised, marketed WNBA drastically exceeded all expectations in fan interest, attracting nearly 9,000 fans per game. From the abyss, the Houston Comets' Cynthia Cooper, as the league top performing player, averaged a league best 22 points a game. The Houston Comets won the league's first championship 65-51 over the Liberty. And at least in the beginning, it seemed that two professional basketball leagues could coexist in America. The traditional ABL in the winter and the hyped, dynamic WNBA in the summer. The WNBA was well on its way with the NBA backing as the journey continued. Survival of the fittest, how the WNBA garnered a monopoly over American women's basketball. The two league women's basketball format in America, which appeared to be promising in 1997, however, was not to be. The WNBA had no interest in cooperating with the ABL. After a few years of fierce competition between the ABL and the WNBA, the deeper pocketed WNBA emerged as the sole survivor. The first sign of conflict between the ABL and the WNBA was in September 1997, when the ABL most valuable player, Nikki McCray, jumped ship to the WNBA. Although McCray was willing to accept a pay cut from $150,000 in the ABL to just $50,000 in the WNBA, the league maximum. McCray felt that playing in the WNBA would be more profitable in the long run because of the WNBA premier exposure. Without a national broadcast television, the ABL tried to boost its presence by proposing various joint market initiatives with the WNBA, including a proposal for interleague all-star game. However, the WNBA rejected all ABA overtures, instead opting to compete directly against the ABL for the women's basketball market. As a result, the ABL was placed in an undesirable position of needing to offer players significantly higher salaries to prevent them from defecting to the more prominent competitor. Even the ABL totals in attendance increased 20% in the second year, and the league announced expansion plans in the new cities such as Chicago. The ABL was heading into a no-win situation. By the spring of 1998 was especially telling for the ABL as 7 of the 8 collegiate All-American women basketball players signed with the WNBA. In the interview from the San Francisco Examiner, Gary Cavelli, CEO and founder of the ABL, acknowledged, "I think we won rounds 1 and 2. They're winning the third round. We're definitely behind at this point." As the journey continues, while the WNBA attendance climbed above 10,000 fans per game in the second season, the ownership moved toward expanding the league. The ABL spent its 1998 summer dissolving its failed Long Beach, California franchise and trying to cope with superstar Don Staley's defection to the WNBA. The ABL did not catch one huge break in the 1998-98 season. As the NBA players went on strike for the first half of the season, the national broadcast television temporarily picked up ABL games as a replacement. Nevertheless, once the NBA players returned to action, the ABL broadcasts were ceased. And on Tuesday, December 22nd, 1998, the ABL folded and filed for bankruptcy. Transitioning the journey of the game, changes in the WNBA structure upon the ABL bankruptcy. Once the WNBA became the only women's game in town, the league began to pursue an expansion strategy, but it was never able to significantly increase its fan base. After averaging an all-time high of 10,869 fans per game, the NBA, the owners, in the 1998 season, WNBA attendance began to decline steadily, falling below the average of 10,000 fans per game for the first time in 2000, and then falling beyond the 9,000 fans per game in 2003. By 2006, the WNBA average per game attendance fell way below and all the way down to 7,490 fans per game. With the attendance and revenue declining, players began to take steps to protect their interests of the decline in play. On November the 6th, 1998, shortly before the ABL filed for bankruptcy, the WNBA women's basketball players made the first step to change their relationship with the NBA, with the WNBA forming the Women's National Basketball Players Association, the first labor union ever comprised entirely of professional women athletes. Shortly after, on April 30th, 1999, the Women's National Basketball Association, according with the WNBA PA website, the inaugural CBA imprised significant advances for WNBA players. All represents for all women an important step toward pay equity and general equality. The CBA established a near 75% minimum salary increase for WNBA rookies and 100% minimum salary increase for WNBA veterans beyond the minimums that the WNBA had previously unilaterally imposed. The CBA collective bargaining agreement also provided year-round health coverage, a retirement plan, guaranteed contract share of licensing income. Yet, as compared to the status obtained in the collective bargaining by men's professional sports, the WNPA was relatively powerless. The Women's National Basketball Players Association was unable to bargain as aggressively as most men's sports unions because the WNBA teams regularly threatened to either shut down or lock out the players if the Women's National Basketball Players Association did not agree to terms proposed by the National Basketball League. With the maximum WNBA player salary at a time standing at just $50,000, most WNBA players had not saved enough money to sustain a lockout. The journey, as it continues, the first CBA between the parties was ratified April 30th, 1999, and expired on September 15th, 2002. On April 25th, 2003, the WNBA and the WNBA Players Association agreed to a second collective bargaining agreement. This version of the CBA remains in effect today, according to the WNBA Players Association. Advancements in the second CBA, including the creation of free agency, the WNBA players, and the return of player group licensing rights to WNBA players. However, the pay for WNBA players, as well as the revenue generated by the WNBA, remained minuscule compared to that of men in professional sports. Then in 2003, the journey continued. The WNBA decided to transform its business from a structure that included central partnership, central ownership with the NBA in the league overall, to structure including independent team ownership that exists in all four premier men's leagues. The first impetus for this transition was the important decision handed down by the First Circuit Court of Appeals, Frazier versus Major League Soccer, which indicated that the centralized Major League Soccer structure, in many ways similar to the original structure of the WNBA, did not necessarily shield the league from antitrust liability. As a result, the WNBA's structural change to an independent ownership model, WNBA teams begin to independently manage their own operations and pursue their own players and sponsorship deals. Nevertheless, the structure did not affect the coordinating decision making of the WNBA, which now occurred through collective bargaining in the process. In the recent years, many of the top women's basketball players, unhappy with their salary prospects in the WNBA, have started spending their offseason playing overseas. A journey that requires the women, a number of American born players have indicated they will play overseas exclusively. For example, Tina Thompson, a four-time WNBA champion with the Houston Comets, recently indicated she may forego the WNBA altogether because she believes she can triple her WNBA max salary by playing exclusively in Moscow, Russia. As we continue with the Northwestern School of Law, the journal, as they have reversed this, I speak to say this is in 2008, but how much really has changed? When you look at the structure between the NBA and the WNBA, it seems that the journey has carried all the way in to 2005. Now we address the WNBA educational policy. From the incipient stages, both the WNBA and the ABL enforced independent league regulations to prevent their teams from drafting players that still had NCAA college eligibility. When the ABL ceased its operations in 1998, however, prospective women basketball players lost the leverage of having two separate leagues vying for player services. Without two leagues, the only bargaining chip a player had that did not meet the age educational policy was the threat to play permanently overseas. For some players with young families well settled in the United States, that was not a viable option. Once the ABL ceased to exist, the WNBA players unionized. The WNBA took affirmative steps to protect its age educational policy from antitrust scrutiny by adding reference to the league's age educational policy into the collective bargaining agreement. As currently written, Article Section 1 CBA, which is entitled Player Eligibility, states the following: an American player is eligible to be selected into the WNBA draft only if she will be at least 22 years old during the calendar year in which such draft is held, has graduated from a 4-year college or university, or is a graduate from a college or university during the calendar year in which the draft is held, attended a 4-year college or university or original class in such college or university, has been graduated, or is a graduate during the calendar year in which such draft is held, and she is either has no remaining intercollegiate college eligibility and renounces her remaining intercollegiate college eligibility by written notice to the WNBA 10 days prior to the draft. In essence, the age educational policy mandates that any American born player wait until age 22 to complete 4 years of college before entering the WNBA. Northwestern School, Journal of Law, and Social Policy covered the legal implications of the WNBA age educational policy. As of the date of the publication, and again, folks, we are speaking from the winter of 2008, which some has changed, but it seems some is still the same. The legal implications of the WNBA age educational policy. As of the date of the publication, the WNBA age educational policy has not been challenged in court. However, if challenged, a court might find the WNBA policy violates Section 1 of the Sherman's Act as an illegal group boycott. The legal standard for reviewing group boycotts. Section 1 of the Sherman Act states, in pertinent part, that every contract, combination, or conspiracy in the restraint of trade or commerce is declared illegal. This section of the Sherman Act governs concerted refusals to deal with group boycotts, even though the most concerted refusals to deal and void product boycotts. Concerted refusals to deal may also concern boycotts in the labor market, such as the market of professional athletic services. The public policy rationale against group boycotts is fortified by the Supreme Court of the United States in the 1914 case Eastern State Retailer Lumber Dealers Association against the United States. An actless, an actless harm is done by one become a public wrong when done by many that act in concert. Conspiracy may also be prohibited or punished if the result is hurtful or harmful to the public or an individual against who it's being concerted against. In other words, the danger caused by concerting conducts occurs where multiple companies act together in a manner that reduces consumer freedom of choice. This outcome is troubling because the consumer loses the opportunity to use purchasing power to indicate a preference for boycotted product. As the journal Northwestern School Journal covers the prima facie test for the review of allegedly anti competitive content. In addressing whether the allegedly anti competitive content violates Section 1 of the Sherman Act, a court will begin with the prima facie review of conduct by applying one of the Supreme Court's three sanctioned tests. One, from the end of spectrum, if a defendant's business practices are so pernicious that they have no redeeming value, the court will apply the per se rule, which presumes the prima facie case of antitrust violation without any further investigation of alleged justification. The per se rule is a bright line rule that facilitates legal certainty and promotes judicial economy. The purpose of the per se rule is to avoid subjective policy judgments that most courts recognize are more appropriate for legislative rather than judicial determination. At the end of the spectrum, if allegedly anti competitive conduct seems to yield more ambiguous effect, the court will apply rule of reason analysis, under which the court conducts the full economic investigation to determine whether the defendant's conduct is legal. Applying of the rule of reason, a court will determine whether a plaintiff can make a prima facie showing violation based on the presence of the following three factors: market power, anti competitive effects that exceed pro competitive justification, and harm. Between these two tests, if the court presumes allegedly anti competitive conduct is neither completely pernicious or completely ambiguous, the court will apply the third test called either the quick look rule of reasoning. Under the test, the court will consider economic effects based on the rudimentary understanding of economics. According to legal scholars, antitrust law is in the midst of undergoing a creeping transition. Courts are moving away from applying the per se rule toward applying either the quick look test or even more frequently the full rules of reason. This shift has emerged as a result in the changing understanding of industrial economics, which has cast doubt on traditional notions about competitive effect. You're looking at something now as we look through the journey. It is an unbelievable journey that Northwestern School of Law was able to deliver. And we look like it's deja vu as we come, and the WNBA is repeating the cycle. From once having two leagues to leagues being dissolved, from the NBA that was willing and able to run the league, but then decided the league was no profitable and they were going to fold the league. But they gave the women an opportunity to become independent and run the league, and the result has not met. But we moved to 2025. Instead of being the ABL versus the WNBA, it's unrivaled versus the WNBA. The journey continues. The age limit, the test of time of litigation. Discovery work product doctor. This is the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast. We're powered up by Fanatics, and that is the journey and history of the WNBA versus the NBA.